June 1st, 2021, and the time is 1:03. This meeting is being held virtually. I am Bill Collins, the chairman, and with us are members Brian Hartman and Scott Riggins. I don't see that we have Steve Miller present at this point, but we'll go ahead and get started. Point out that we do have a new member, Brian Rhodes, but I also noticed that I don't believe he is present either. We do have a quorum, and I would like the ADWR staff members to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Kyle Miller, AMA Director.
Kennedy Shepard, GUAC Coordinator. Melissa Sykes, WMAP Coordinator.
Jenna Norris, Governor's Water Council Coordinator.
John Riggins, Statewide Planning Manager.
Thank you. Kyle, do you expect Brian Rhodes to step in at some point?
He did put this as available on his calendar, so we presumed that he would be here, but we haven't heard anything from him.
Okay. Has he gone through the procedures of the various forms that he has to, and oaths that he has to acknowledge?
Yeah, he's all finished up with those. So he's all good to go on our end.
Very good. Thank you. At this time, if there's any audience members that are interested in introducing yourselves, please type your name and your affiliation into the chat box. Moving on, we will move on to item number 2, the webinar logistics. We'll let Ms. Shepard go ahead and present those.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to go over some webinar logistics before we get started. We please do ask that everyone mute your phones during the meeting. This helps reduce our audio feedback. And if you have any questions or comments in the chat box, please feel free to put them in there. They will be read and addressed at the end of each presentation. If you do wish to speak to the council, the call to public is your time. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted to our website and our YouTube page once WebEx has generated that recording. If you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact our help desk, and their contact information is on the screen. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. At this time, we'll move on to item number 3, which is ADWR Current Activities Update, presented by Kyle Miller, the ADWR AMA Director.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. It's good to be with you again. We've been really busy at the department since our last meeting, so I'll be glad to provide a brief update. As you know, our annual reports were due on March 31st, and in response to COVID and our increased teleworking, we attempted to move as much as we could to be able to complete it online from home, while continuing to provide prompt and courteous service to our reporting parties. We succeeded in that goal, thanks in large part to the innovation of our annual reporting coordinator and the hard work of all of our staff. Utilization of our online reporting tool is going to end up being a little bit higher this year than it was last year, and that's good for us in a variety of ways. Results in better data and requires less staff time for QCing and data entry. So good things all around there. We sent out the first round of failure to file notifications in April and are on pace to meet our goal of ending the reporting year with about 5% of rights failing to file across all the AMAs. And as we work to collect any remaining reports, we're also shifting our resources and time to data entry and quality control checks of the reported data. And as I've said a couple times, that's a long and detailed process that can take us several months. But it's really critical for our statewide use estimates that we get those numbers right. And so we'll have those completed in the fall. We've also dedicated a significant amount of time to developing and publishing sector-specific web pages, and we've already received really positive feedback on those. Kennedy is going to open those up and click through them for you so you can see on your screen. These pages contain information about the mandatory conservation programs, some details on each sector, and a frequently asked questions section. The agricultural and uni pages are currently live, and the industrial page is under development. I anticipate it'll be posted in the next week or so. So we're getting close on there. Our planners worked really hard on those pages, and each page is really impressive. So I just want to encourage you to take a look and let us know if you have any thoughts, and please share those with us so we can improve them. The planners are also working on sector-specific data dashboards, and that'll contribute to our data sharing and transparency initiative, and should be really useful for anyone looking to learn more about water use in the AMAs. We have a really strong team in place, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those finished products with you in the future. The department has also recently published a legislative affairs webpage, and Kennedy's going to that right now. The top area of that page provides an update on the current status of the legislative session, and below that you can see any post-committee hearings. It currently says none at this time. Our legislative liaison, Ben Alternator, tracks relevant bills on this page, and if you click enacted legislation, you can see which bills have passed and been signed by Governor Ducey so far this session. Each listed bill has a short summary and a link to the actual text of the bill that you can go to if you're interested in reading that. We are continuing our work to administer the $2 million groundwater conservation grant that was part of DCP. And of the 18 selected projects across all the AMAs, 16 have been executed and are moving forward. The other 2 are in progress, and those contracts should be finalized soon. Outside the AMA section, our groundwater modeling unit continues making progress on their projects, including updating the Prescott AMA model, developing a new groundwater model for the Phoenix AMA, and that's going to combine the East and West Salt River Valley and the Hassayampa subbasins, updating the Tucson AMA model, and participating in the Pinal stakeholder group activities and meetings. And then finally, our public stakeholder processes are ongoing. The Arizona Reconsultation Committee continues to hold modeling and analysis work group meetings, having met twice since our last UAC meeting on March 11th and May 13th. The full Arizona Reconsultation Committee met last week on the 26th, and recordings for all of those meetings are available on our website if you're interested in catching up there. We've also made progress on the management plans and those activities, and Amanda will be providing a more detailed update later in the meeting. And likewise, the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council continues to hold committee meetings, and a summary of their activities will be provided by John Riggins a little bit later in this meeting. So that concludes the agency activities update. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Do any of the members have questions for Kyle on his presentation? Kyle, I do have a question. I understand that the governor just vetoed 22 bills on his desk. Does that have any significant impact on water issues?
I don't believe at this time it does. I'm not certain any water bills were vetoed, but I'll have to touch base with our legislative liaison and provide a more detailed answer after the meeting, if that's okay with you.
No, that's fine. No, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Chairman Collins.
Yes. Mr. Riggins.
Before we move off of that, I do have one question. In discussion of fifth management program development, when may the Pinal AMA start having discussions with the department concerning the unique aspects of our AMA as regard to the other AMAs, and knowing full well the department does intend to try to paint us with a broad brush the same as the others?
Sure. Natalie, are you on the call? Would you like to answer that?
Sorry about that. Took me a minute to get to my mute button. Yes, this is Natalie Mack. So thank you for that question, Mr. Riggins. We, several months ago now, Kyle and I had reached out to individual GUAC members asking for some feedback if there was any specific topics or areas that we could for your specific AMA. So we are still looking for that type of feedback, that type of customization feedback. But I guess a more direct answer to your question would be now. That now is the time for those types of suggestions and discussions and kind of helping direct us to those places where customization may be needed for a given AMA.
Thank you, Ms. Mast. Chairman Collins, I would suggest with the response that was just given, it seems like it is incumbent upon the Pinal AMA and therefore the GUAC to initiate these concepts with the department. I would suggest that a meeting be held with the GUAC and as many members of the community as we can in a non-electronic fashion to get public participation so we can begin a program in detailed format, how we expect the Pinal AMA to not be handled the same as the other, say, field AMAs.
Thank you, Mr. Riggins. I'm going to say, my other question would be, and maybe it's already online, is there a specific, what am I trying to say, program already laid out for the Pinal AMA that we can either view online or you can send to us so that we know what the content currently is and what we need to be looking at to possibly change or add to?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. This is Natalie Mast again. So Amanda is going to be presenting later in today's meeting an overview of each of the concepts that have been proposed for the fifth management plans. I'll let her provide those details once we get to that point in the agenda, but I will say that we do have a website that is our 5MP concepts page. I know we've shared that a couple times at GUAC meetings before, but the 5MP concepts page has written summaries and the details of each of those proposals, including data and supporting documentation.
Would that information be specific to the Pinal AMA?
So that is the information that has been developed broadly for the fifth management plans. And through the process of these conversations with the GUACs and other stakeholders in each AMA, we're looking for additional feedback on whether additional customization is needed. This is pretty similar to how other programs have been structured in the past, where there's a similar identical structure across the AMAs with tweaks made to the given structures.
I guess I'm a little concerned about what the definition of tweak would mean in this particular instance. I do agree with Scott Riggins that I would like to see us have a face-to-face sit-down meeting discussion. It's a little more useful to have that face-to-face than try to do it virtually sometime in July.
Mr. Chair, yeah, we can have some discussions in the department and see what we can get on the calendar. We have been talking about kind of transitioning back to an in-person approach, and we've decided as a department that it's going to need to be hybrid. So we'll be glad to come down and meet with you in person, but there needs to be an online option for people who aren't comfortable coming out in person. So, with that being said, yeah, we'd be glad to come down and have face-to-face meeting with you.
Is there an opportunity to do that at the Casa Grande City Council chambers like we did about 1.5 years, 2 years ago?
We've just started doing some of the research on it, but that was kind of my first thought, was doing it there. I think the internet connection is fine and all the webcams worked perfectly there. So my guess is that's where it will be, but we don't have a final answer yet.
Okay, very good. Scott, do you have any other comments?
Yes, Chairman Collins. Yes, I do believe that the department will find, as we begin this dialogue, there will be a large number of people that are very interested, property owners, residents, various people affected by these regulations in the Pinal AMA, that will want to have a pretty thorough discussion of the fifth management plan, insofar as we all know that the rules governing the Pinal AMA are vastly different than the Safe Field AMAs. And so I do believe that as we begin this, we should understand that it will be a long process to get everything down and ready to go into the period of time of accepting these management plans.
Thank you, Mr. Riggins. Any other comments from the members? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is the Colorado River update by Brett, I believe it's Eslin.
Thank you. Yes, you got that correct.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brett Eslin. I am a water resources engineer for the Colorado River section at AWR. The second slide, please. Thank you, Candy. So for today's presentation, we'll start with a brief review of the Colorado River system reservoir status. These numbers were updated on May 20th. So they have changed slightly, but not very much. For the upper basin, beginning in the upper right and then moving down, we have Fontenelle at 37% capacity, Flaming Gorge at 85%, Blue Mesa at 41%, followed by Morrow Point at 94%, and Navajo at 63%. Moving to Lake Powell, currently at an elevation of 3560.3 with a storage of 8.3 million acre feet at 34% capacity. Lake Mead, as of the 20th, was at an elevation of 1075.9 with a storage of 9.7 million acre feet or 37% capacity. I did check that a little bit ago. It's down to 1073.5 as of today. Looking at the reservoir system as a whole, we're at 25.1 million acre feet in storage or 41% of capacity. And looking back at this time last year, we were at 30.8 million acre feet or 50% capacity. Obviously, this past year's hydrology has not helped with the reservoir elevations. Next slide, please. So here we have the SWE or snow water equivalent chart for inflow into Lake Powell. We have a current year, 2021 in blue. Again, these numbers are as of May 20th. We were at 55% or 3.4 inches of the median of 6.2 for this time of the year. Currently at 21% of the peak seasonal median of 16.1 inches. Historically, that usually occurs around the second week of April. However, this year, it peaked March 30th at 89% of median. And 89% of median doesn't seem very bad, but because of the incredibly dry conditions of the soil, the snow water runoff just did not make it into the river's tributaries. For comparison, I've also have included last year in green, we have 2002 in cyan and 2012 in red. If we're looking at the worst years for April through July unregulated inflow into Powell, 2002 ranks number 1 at 0.964 million acre feet, followed by 1977 was number 2 at 1.2 million acre feet, and 2012 is number 3 at 2.06 million acre feet. Now, the current forecast that came out at the beginning of May was 2 million acre feet, which put us on track to become the third worst April through July unregulated inflow of recorded history for the lake. That since has been reduced to 1.85 in the mid-May forecast, and most likely we'll be getting a new forecast coming out. It should actually be today or tomorrow. And it's most likely going to go down a little bit again. I'm thinking somewhere around 1.8, maybe 1.81. So yeah, just the super dry conditions, the very dry winter, it didn't translate to any good for us. The next slide, please. So there's a lot of information on this. We'll spend a little time on this slide, but we're looking at the historic water year unregulated inflow into Lake Powell. Those are the blue bars. And the light blue overlay is the April through July volumes. So you can see that the April through July runoff really makes up most of the water that's accumulated during the year. We have a 30-year average, which was 10.83, and that was 1981 through 2010. However, NOAA released new averages on May 4th, and that's going to switch to 1991 through 2020, which I'm showing in purple. So losing those 10 wet years and getting 10 dry years, the average has dropped approximately 1.2 million acre feet. And if you look at the right side of the graph, you can see the May 24-month study, the min, most, and max projections. Right now, the May probable most is 3.64 million acre feet. That's 34% of the old average, or 38% of the new average. The June 24-month study will be released in approximately 2 weeks. So we will see updated numbers, and most likely those are going to decrease. The next slide, please. So we have the low inflows and how those are going to affect. We're looking at the 24-month study of May. We have the most probable in green. That's compared to the April most probable in gold. The max is shown in blue and the minimum in red. You can see in the most and minimum probable models runs that Lake Powell will be releasing 7.48 million acre feet for water year 22. And the minimum, because of the extremely low levels of Lake Powell, would only be releasing 7.0 million acre feet. That's not confirmed until the August 24-month study, but because of the forecasts, I don't see that changing anytime soon. The end of calendar year 21, May most probable elevation for Lake Powell is 3536.74, and just within a month of the forecasts going down, that's a drop in elevation of over 13 feet, with the min and max range of 3530 to 3558. End of calendar year 22, May most probable elevation is at 3556.53. Again, down over 13 feet from the April study. And that's a min and max range of 3517 to 3606. The next slide, please. So now we're looking at Lake Mead. The slight difference between the May and April is due to change to side inflows from the actuals and forecasts. The end of calendar year 21, most probable elevation is 1065.82. It's a 1.5 foot decrease since April, and a min-max range of 1065 to 1067. And we see from this study that we will most likely be in a tier 1 shortage for calendar year 22. Again, that's not confirmed until August. Looking at the end of calendar year 22, most probable, mean elevation of 1048.83 with a min-max range of 1045 to 1062. That projection puts us below 1050, pushes Arizona into a further shortage, and that would be a tier 2A going into calendar year 23. Next slide, please. So we're talking about the side inflows or intervening flows. The projected releases from Lake Powell haven't changed over the last couple 24-month studies, but we do show changes in the Lake Mead elevation because of the intervening flows between Powell and Mead. And as you can see, the flows have underperformed the entire water year to date. Even if we actually get 100% of average for the remainder, the water year would be at 73% and the calendar year at 79%. However, because every month has been underperforming, I would expect those numbers to decrease as the year continues. The next slide, please. So in April, the Bureau of Reclamation released the April CRIMS MTOM mode CRSS model. Currently looking at the Lake Powell 5-year probability table. And based on the April forecast, Powell will most likely be operating in the mid-elevation release tier, releasing 7.48. That's a 91% chance, an increase of 15% since the January 5-year table came out. There's a 59% chance of back-to-back water year 22 and 23, 7.48 million acre-foot releases in the stress test, and a 46% chance of back-to-back 7.48s in the full hydrology. The mid-elevation release tier is also the most likely operating tier in 23, where the projection shows 65% chance of operating in that tier under the stress test. That's an increase of 5% since January. If this year gets worse, like in 2002, There is a chance that we will end the year with PAL below 3525 and operate in the lower elevation balancing tier in water year 22. That was that minimum probability that showed the 7.0 million acre foot release. Next slide, please. So here, looking at the same study, this is for Lake Mead, the 5-year probability table. There's a 97% chance of shortage in calendar year 22. The chance of shortage in 23 through 25 exceeds 75% in every year for both the full and stress test hydrology. There's a greater than 90% chance of shortage in 23 in both hydrology scenarios. The chances of a level 2 and level 3 shortage increased from between 1 to 10% in 23 through 25 in both the full and stress test hydrology compared to the January model. The first projected level 2 shortage is in 2023, and the chance of a level 2 shortage in 2024 increased from 50 to 60% in the stress test hydrology. There is now a 36 to 44% chance that Lake Mead will fall below elevation 1025 in any month in 2024 or 2025 in the stress test hydrology. And in both the full and stress test hydrology, there's a less than 4% chance of falling to 1,000 feet in any month through now and 2024. Next slide, please. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions, and I've also included some useful links that you can keep track of how the forecast is going, or just wait until I give another presentation next month after the new study comes out.
Do the members have any questions for Mr. Eastland?
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Hartman.
Yes, Brian.
Brett, do you have a link to where we can access this? Your report?
Yes, it is posted on the AMA website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brett. Appreciate your presentation. We'll move on to item number 5, which is Pinal County Water Augmentation Authority update by Mr. Singleton. Joe, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, okay, good. You guys have it. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I think it's been a little while since we had a chance to address the GUAC, although we do have some overlapping membership. So hopefully there hasn't been too much suffering from the reporting gap. This is just a welcome slide. What is noticeable is that the authority is enfranchised in Title 45 of the Arizona Revised Statutes, which is somewhat unusual in that most water entities you might expect to reasonably find in Title 48. Next slide, please. The authority is a corporate and political body that can act in its own official corporate name. Somewhat confusing from the name of the organization is we are not an office of Pinal County government. We are independent. The organization might have been more properly named the Pinal AMA Water Augmentation Authority, as our borders are those of the AMA and not necessarily the county. Like the GUAC, we have a volunteer board of directors, and as I mentioned, share several, as we also have historically. Our goal is to support the development of responsible, collaborative, and sustainable water planning and management in the Pinal Active Management Area. Next slide, please. So part of what that means in statute or suggested in statute is to work with regional water planning, assisting our providers in meeting their requirements under the Groundwater Management Act and the management plans, cooperate in augmenting supplies, and to represent AMA interest in development of water plans and other type of meetings, such as this one. Next slide, please. Our board of directors is a little bit unique, and you'll see some of the sharing of members I spoke about in addition to Chairman Collins, who is also chairman of our board. You'll see Supervisor Miller represents Pinal County on our board, and Mr. Hartman represents the Maricopa Stanfield Irrigation and Drainage District. One interesting thing to note is many of our other municipal members are council people or city engineers. And we also have private water companies that have representatives on our board, which is somewhat unique. So we have muni ag and private water companies all having input into our board. The boards that have elected bodies behind them, like obviously the county and the city governments, appoint their own members. The private water companies, which are not run by an elected board of directors, have their appointments made through the county board of supervisors. Next slide, please. So for an update over the last year or so, we've had all of the challenges that everybody else has had during COVID. Going to an almost complete online environment had its challenges. I've been pleasantly surprised about how well it works. We were able to work with a facilitator to have a new strategic plan for the authority. The previous one is about 9 years old and doesn't really reflect where we were at today as a board or the challenges that we're facing now. In response to assured water supply issues in the AMA, we did engage a professional study of the water model and the assured water supply assumptions that are being used with it, in order to kind of see if there were some places where we might be able to make up some ground in showing water supplies for new development. Now, I should note that Matrix New World, who was our consultant on this, has done quite a bit of work. The Department of Water Resources hasn't necessarily bought off on all of it, so I want to be clear about that. But we did take a look at some things, particularly with deepening existing wells or being able to move them in a manner that is currently allowed under rule and statute, to see what that would do, particularly with the places where the model and the assured water supply assumptions for the 100 years showed what might be over pumping. We engaged a professional lobbyist to pursue authority objectives, which we established a little less than 2 years ago, and we'll revisit again this summer. As such, we ran legislation in both of the previous the current legislative session and the one previous to that. The previous one was, obviously, we were cut short by COVID, as many other people were in that process, and did have a discussion on our legislation in the current legislative session. Kind of the centerpiece to that legislation was an idea of creating a contract assessment against new lands in order to generate the financial resources that would be necessary to obtain a new water supply. We had some mixed results from the development community on that, and ultimately that bill was not moved any further forward. We've also had 5 new board members since April of 2019, brought a new energy to the board, and that's what we'll be proceeding with into the next year. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Joe. Do the members have any questions of Joe on the Pinal County Water Augmentation Authority? Hearing none, I'd like to take a moment to drop back. I understand that from Natalie that Brian Rhodes has called in and he's on the line. Brian, if you're able to give us I'd like to welcome you to the GUAC, and if you could, maybe give us just a brief overview of your interests and your background.
Brian, to unmute yourself, you press *6. I can see that you're still muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm still getting the use of doing all that stuff. But, yeah, can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name is Brian Rhodes. I'm originally from Casa Grande, Arizona. Grew up there as a kid and got involved in agriculture at a young age and really took an interest in it. Started farming while I was attending Arizona State University and did that through graduation. Upon graduation, I actually did a whole reset and moved to Wall Street, worked for Lehman Brothers for a few years, and then moved back to Arizona in 2003 and resumed my farming operation. I actually moved back to the East Coast and went to business school and went back to Wall Street, but I was still farming at that time. So we've been farming, continuously since then. But in 2012, I moved back to Arizona full time and, resumed, running our business on the ground full time in Arizona. And we farm kind of all throughout Pinal County in 4 different water districts, as well as some that's outside of districts. And diversified operation where we're growing cotton, corn, grain, alfalfa, a lot of people local dairies, we're growing roses. So that's kind of it. Unless somebody has any questions or like me to address anything further.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate your input and look forward to continuing to have you on the DUAC going forward. Does anyone have any questions for Brian while he's on the phone? Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and move on to item number 6, which is the WMAP updates. I believe, Melissa, you'll be providing that.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, council members and members of the public. My name is Melissa Sykes, and I'm the WMAP coordinator. I'll be going over the Water Management Assistance Program fund balance, the status of the DCP groundwater conservation grants, and will introduce the WMAP project requesting renewal today. At our previous meeting in January, we introduced the 2021 withdrawal fees reflected in this table here. Below the table is a breakdown of the current WMAP fund. The current balance is $445,791. Of that, $350,000 is committed, leaving a balance of $95,791. If we renew the Natural Resource Education Center contract for $30,000, we would be left with $65,791 in the WMAP fund. We expect to collect about $338,000 next year, and the next project to request renewal will be the Irrigation Management Service Program, whose contract expires in April of next year. They were previously awarded $120,000 for 1 year. Projects that are currently funded with the WMAP funds are the Irrigation Management Service for $120,000, which was renewed after our last meeting, the Natural Resources Education Center that has a remaining balance of $15,000, and the Pinal County Water Augmentation Authority that was recently approved to receive $200,000 for fiscal year 2020-2021. The PICWA project is dictated in statute to receive up to $200,000 on an annual basis. Next, I will give an update on the groundwater conservation grant. Since we last met, the leak detection equipment replacement project with Arizona Water Company was executed. The contract is set to end in July of 2025. We are still in the drafting phase for the pumping efficiency project with the Maricopa-Stanfield Irrigation and Drainage District. Before I move on, are there any questions regarding the WMAP funds or the groundwater conservation projects?
Do the members have any questions for Ms. Sykes on the current presentation? Hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now we will get started with the renewal presentation. We have Jennifer Salcido presenting on and requesting renewal for the Natural Resources Education Center. Jennifer, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Good afternoon. I think I got it.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Collins, members of the council, members of the public, and guests. I'm Jennifer Salcido. I'm the director of the Natural Resource Education Center. And I want to thank you for inviting me to present today at this meeting with some new faces. I know it's important to give a little background of our program. And so I'll do that in this presentation, and I'll also give you a brief overview of what we've done this school year. and what the Natural Resource Education Center has planned for our the next upcoming year. So if we could have the next slide, please. So what is the Natural Resource Education Center? Well, we call it NREC, and NREC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to nurture an awareness of natural and renewable natural resources here in Arizona. NREC was started in 1996, and so we are celebrating 25 years of educating residents in Pinal County, children, students, and adults alike. So for 25 years, we've been going strong, and we plan on continuing that. There are 24 ed centers that are sponsored by the NRCDs in Arizona, but NREC in Pinal County really is a unique program. It's one of a kind in its offerings and programming. In this slide here, you can see some of our two of our classrooms. We have 2 classrooms on the campus of Central Arizona College. We have 2 outdoor classrooms that we use as well. And we also have 4 irrigated acres that we use to plant crops. In the fall, we plant corn, where we have a corn maze for students to come out and take part in. And then in the spring, we have a 2-acre garden where students come out and harvest and irrigate and learn all about natural resources. So if we could have the next slide, please. NREC staff includes myself, and we have an outstanding teaching team. We have Jan Zapata, Laura Lee Wirtz, and Carolyn Harbison. And of our staff here, 3 of us are certified teachers here in the state of Arizona. If we could have the next slide, please. The Natural Resource Education Center offers online presentations, classroom visits, field trips, and a website that includes video presentations and offerings as well. NREC is sponsored, again, like I said, by 3 of the Natural Resource Education, or I'm sorry, Natural Resource Conservation districts. A lot of natural resource words in there. 3 districts. We have the Eloy Natural Resource Conservation District, the Florence Coolidge Conservation District, and the West Pinal Conservation District. And NREC is also overseen by the Arizona State Land Department. And we are very grateful for their sponsorship. Without them, we wouldn't exist. And because of COVID this year, of course, our programming looked a little bit different, but up there on the screen, you can see we did a lot of Zoom meetings. We enjoy doing those. Of course, we like to be in person, and that's the best way to present our programs, but we adapted, and we found that we were actually able to really get into the classrooms and do some hands-on learning. Even though we weren't there, we were able to do some hands-on learning with those classrooms. So we adapted, and hopefully next year we can get back to in-person, but we'll probably be using both forms of presentations next year. We could have the next slide, please. So we run 4 programs each school year. We call them the Farm Field Ag Ventures programs, and we offer a Veggie Ventures program, which is offered in the spring to 2nd graders. We have a Water Out West, which we call the WOW program, which is all about water conservation and water history of Arizona. And that's for 5th grade through middle school, and that runs in the spring. We have Ag Ventures Corn Festival in the fall, which we present to 3rd graders and 4th graders, and that's where they come out and take part in our cornfield, our corn maze. We have from alfalfa to ice cream dairy program, which we run for 2nd graders in the fall. We have the 5 C's of Arizona, which is a very popular program, and we run that for 3rd graders in the spring. And we have a new program. It's called Let's Get Crackin' Egg program, and that's for kindergartners, where we actually go into their classrooms and bring in baby chickens, and they learn all about where their eggs come from. And that's been a very popular program, and we hope to be able to get into classrooms next school year to get that up and going again. If we could have the next slide, please. Oh, I think mine on my sheet here, we got this a little bit out of order, but I did mention the sponsorship of the 3 conservation districts. And again, like I said, we are very grateful to those districts and their support. Without them, we wouldn't exist. And but unfortunately, of course, like anything else, funding is limited. So their support of us, of course, is limited. So NREC is always looking for additional support and grants from other entities to help supplement their support. We could have the next slide, please. Grants that NREC has secured. We have currently the grant from the Arizona Department of Water Resources, which we appreciate very much. A Central Arizona Project, Salt River Project. We also have the John F. Long Foundation and the local Pinal County Pinal 40 group sponsoring our NREC program, and we appreciate all of those. We could have the next slide. Well, ADWR supports the Water Out West program, one of our 6 programs that we run. This year, because we had to revamp our program and most of it was online, we decided to focus on water conservation and our Water Out West program. So all of the Zoom meetings that we conducted this school year were all about water and water conservation. And so we adapted our curriculum for kindergarten through 5th grade, and we developed the Zoom meetings for that. And we made sure that all of the content met Arizona State educational standards, and even included some STEM concepts in there. We built on some information that some of the classes had learned in previous years through Project WET, and we really believe our program is unique throughout Arizona, and we even with COVID, we were able to adapt and get into those classrooms. Our teachers worked hard this school year, getting together student kits that we delivered to Pinal County schools, that these student kits were able to be used in the classroom while we were presenting online through these Zoom meetings. So it was interactive with our NREC staff and the students and teachers. And we got some really good feedback from the teachers with that. So we were really excited about that. We could have the next slide. With the next year coming up, we're very hopeful that we'll get back into classrooms and do in-person learning and presentations. And so in a normal school year, we either take our show on the road and we go to the schools and take our water trailers, or schools come to our classrooms at CAC and we present all of these different activities and presentations for the students. We have a water cycle presentation. We have a watershed presentation. The Rolling Rivers is our mobile water trailers that we use to take to classrooms, talk about conservation and water management. We had a water movement management station. We talk about water history and conservation, and the students make pinch pots. And we also talk about irrigation, and the kids get to try their hands at irrigating, which is always fun. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a picture of our Rolling Rivers trailers that we take on the road. We'll actually be taking these trailers this summer. We will be participating in the Casa Grande Elementary School District's ag camp at Kaywood Farms, and we will be presenting our water trailers there. And you can see the signage there and our sponsors, and we appreciate that. Before I go on to this slide, I would like to mention that we were able to reach 5 different school districts this school year. That equated to about 450 students and 20 adults. And we appreciated being able to even get that. I mean, it was hard in the beginning when students were online learning from home. It was difficult to get schools to have the time to invite us in. But once students were back in the classroom and still online, then we had the chance to really set up our Zoom meetings and get that going. And that really didn't start until mid-March. So between mid-March and the end of May, we were able to see about 450 students. Some other expenses that NREC occurs every year, of course, are resource materials, our classroom supplies, office supplies. We lease our classrooms from Central Arizona College. Of course, we have to pay for our own Wi-Fi and our accountant. So those are expenses that we do occur. Next slide. Please. Goals for the 21-22 school year. Again, like I said, we're very hopeful that we're going to get into the classrooms. I've met with 3 of our Pinal County superintendents, and they're very hopeful and encouraged that we will be able to get into the classrooms and see those students personally. And I know Casa Grande and Coolidge have already assured me that they will resume field trips, which is very encouraging. But I know there are districts that will not be doing that. So we will continue with our online presentations, our Zoom meetings, and kind of do a hybrid both. And I think we'll actually be able to meet bigger goals and actually maybe bring in some of the very small school districts in Pinal County using the Zoom online meetings. So it's been a learning experience and it's been beneficial this year. We will continue with the material kits for classroom follow-up and support next year. If we have to do the online learning, we prefer that they come out to Central Arizona College and really experience our programs to the fullest, but we will accommodate the best we can, as many classrooms as we can. We could have the next slide. Thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate Arizona Department of Water Resources for inviting us today. Sincerely, we appreciate your support, and without you, we couldn't do what we do at NREC and deliver the quality programs that we do every year. So we thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your presentation. Do any of the members have questions for Jennifer? Hearing none, I will point out that this is actually an action item. And I would need to touch base with Melissa Sykes again. The action item would be to a recommendation for continued funding to the Department of Director of the department. Melissa, what level were we looking to support?
Jennifer Salcido had reached out to me and that they would be requesting the same amount, so $38,000 for 1 year.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the director that the program be continued at the $30,000 level.
Chair, this is Scott Riggins.
Mr. Riggins.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Scott. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Hartman. Looks like a great program. I'd like to second it.
Thank you, Brian. That gives us a motion and a second. I would like to have a roll call vote if we could do that. Kyle, if you can have a roll call called.
Sure. Well, we can start with you, Mr. Chair. How do you vote?
I vote yes.
All right. Mr. Riggins?
Yes.
Mr. Hartman?
Aye.
And Mr. Rhodes?
Mr. Rhodes, to unmute again, it is *6.
I'm really sorry. I didn't realize I had to do it each time. No, I vote yes.
Okay. And Supervisor Miller is still not here, Kennedy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the ayes have it 4-0.
Thank you, Kyle. So we have a favorable action on recommending to the director that the funding level be continued at its current level. Thank you all for your interest. This moves us on to item number 8, which is an update on the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council activities by John Riggins.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. For the record, my name is John Riggins, and I'm the statewide planning manager at the Arizona Department of Water Resources. I'll be providing you an update on the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council activities. I would also like to introduce Jenna Norris. Jenna will be coordinating the council and committee meetings for the department and also be providing this presentation at subsequent updates to the GUACs. So by now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Governor's Water Council and its committees, but as a refresher and for the sake of the new council member, I'll give a quick overview and background of the council and the committees. The council is comprised of 43 individuals from across the state who are appointed by the governor, chaired by the director of the Department of Water Resources. The council may form committees, and the council and committee meetings are all open to the public. Committees work to identify and discuss issues and develop, evaluate, and prioritize recommendations for the council to consider. Staffing and technical support for the council and the committees is provided by the department, and the council meets quarterly. There are 4 active committees and 2 subcommittees for the council. The first being the Post-2025 Active Management Area Committee, who seeks to identify challenges within the state's active management areas, generate strategies and solutions beyond 2025. There's also the Non-AMA Groundwater Committee. The purpose is to address groundwater issues outside of the state's AMAs. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee seeks to identify and explore methods for augmenting water supplies in Arizona, and they have a subcommittee, the Water Storage Site Subcommittee. And then last, the Desalination Committee, whose purpose is to evaluate and overcome barriers to desalination projects and identify opportunities to assist in developing potential projects. They also have a subcommittee, the Legal and Regulatory Subcommittee. So with respect to the council last met on March 19th of this year. The agenda included an overview of the council's 2020-2021 annual report. We also heard a presentation on updates for the 5th management plans from the management plan team, and updates from the various committees to the council on their recent meetings and activities. The next council meeting will be on June 17th, and we will have updated meeting invitation and agendas posted to the meeting information webpage on our website as they become available. And I've also included a link at the bottom of this slide to our council meeting website, or webpage, excuse me. Next, I'll provide you a quick update on the council's committees, starting with the Post-2025 AMA Committee. They last met in February and discussed the issue briefs, which described 6 interrelated water management issues identified and discussed by the committee over the course of more than a year. The committee co-chairs presented a final package of the issue briefs to the council at their council meeting on March 19th. There were concerns raised by some of the committee participants who felt the papers didn't capture their perspectives on the issues and provided a letter detailing their concerns that was appended to the issue briefs. The co-chairs will present a plan for moving forward to the council at the next council meeting on June 17th. And the next post-2025 AMA committee is scheduled for June 22nd at 1 p.m., and that will also be held virtually. The non-AMA Groundwater Committee last met in December of 2020 and had presentations by the department's chief counsel on irrigation non-expansion areas, as well as a presentation by Representative Regina Cobb on introduced legislation for establishing rural groundwater management areas. The committee discussed these two types of authorities, but no consensus on the subject was reached by the committee. The next committee meeting has not been scheduled. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee last met on March 12th of this year and heard presentations from committee members on various studies related to water importation. This includes binational desalination and trans-basin diversion augmentation to move water from the Missouri or Mississippi rivers to offset Colorado River diversions to the Front Range. The subcommittee of the Long-Term Water Committee, the Storage Site Subcommittee, also met in February of 2021. And finally, the Desalination Committee last met on March 25th of this year. The new chair to the Desal Committee will be Henry Day from APS. The committee reviewed the draft Legal and Regulatory Subcommittee Regulatory Background and Summary of Discussion Report, which is a draft report, and I've also included a link at the bottom of this slide to that draft report. The next meeting for the Desal Committee has not been scheduled. So thank you again to the chair and the council members for allowing me to provide an overview of the Governor's Water Council and the committee activities. Please let me know if you have any questions. Jen and I are always available to assist with any questions or comments regarding the council or its committees. Our contact information is on the slide here, as well as the link to the governor's website and then our contacts website as well. And we, as always, we encourage the GUAC members to attend the council and committee meetings, particularly as they're being held virtually. They are provide easier access to participate in the meeting discussions as well as attend virtually. So with that, I want to thank you, and that is my presentation.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your presentation. Do any of the members have questions or comments for Mr. Riggins? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move on to the BMP committee update from Mr. Scott Riggins. Scott, are you there?
Am I better now?
Thank you, Scott.
Yes, pardon me. I fobbled my button. So thank you, Chairman Collins. Before I begin the presentation that I'm going to give, I want to tell all the participants in this meeting, due to the details and various aspects of the BMP program, I have found it's better for anyone who has a question as I'm speaking through this to press in and interrupt, and let's talk about your questions as we go. If there is any questions, it's a long time to wait until the end. With that being said, the BMP program modifications and the program as it eventually was suggested to the department in a finalized form that had consensus agreement with the department was quite a long time in the making. When the fourth management plan was being reviewed and it was trying to update its BMP program, it was found that the department and the regulated community had quite a few disagreements. After a certain amount of work and disagreement, we did agree in the fourth management plan final to some changes in the BMP propositions that the department had suggested, and they agreed to take some out. But there was an agreement that when we negotiated the fifth management plan, everything would be on the table and we would talk things through. In the beginning of that process, again, there were some difficulties to get to the point to where we actually started moving quicker and finding a way to go forward in such a fashion that everyone found to be in the best benefits of both the regulated community and the state. Was found that if we actually, as well as preserving certain aspects of the original BMP program, but actually made some things more diligent, some things more durable on the regulated community, that they had some higher levels of conservation and efficiency that they needed to shoot for in the BMP, and as well as dealing with some of the things that were major disagreements. By combining those philosophies, we eventually began working actually quite well to come up with a document that preserved a lot of what was right with the BMP to begin with, and actually made some things that needed to be addressed better. So we did end up with a consensus document that both the regulated community, through a great number of private meetings between themselves, lobbyists, affected entities, irrigation districts, and the department, we actually agreed to agree and came up with our document. I would ask the department, would we by chance be able to bring the last approved version of the BMP schedule up on the board, or is that something that we would find difficult to do?
Natalie, do you have that handy? And can you share your screen if you do?
I am looking for it. It's posted on the concepts page. Give me just 1 minute here, sorry.
And the April 2nd version, I think, is the best, because it pretty much got it down to the red line of what changed and everything else that didn't. So that would be a good one if we could have it. Had I been totally prepared, I would have asked you to do that yesterday or the day before, but
that is okay. I do have that. Kennedy, if you could give me sharing permissions, I can pull that up. Or if it's easier, Kennedy, I can also just send you the link. I can just drop the link to it in the chat. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you've got it now, Natalie.
well, that's the April 8th version. I don't know if I have that. Is that a red line version, Natalie? Yes, it looks like it is. Okay. Before we go through this, and we'll go through it not in the kind of detail that we were going through it in prior meetings. One thing that changed in a general way of the BMP program, it went from a 10-point system to a 12-point system. Overall points that are required to comply. In that increase of points that needed to be obtained to be a part of the BMP, there were practices that actually diminished in value. There were practices that increased in value. There were practices that were split and had values stay the same or go down. There were some new practices added. There was actually quite a few things that were changed in the overall framework. But still, it is a performance-based and systems-based program, and it more or less captured the original flavor of the BMP program. It just put greater emphasis not only on the definition and observation of what a system was, but how it was being utilized and being maintained. In section 1, there weren't many changes. There was in BMP 1.1, there was some definitional changes, not really a change in concept. All of the different sections did, however, have the concept of a substitute practice added. So as we're going into the future, and we have a BMP committee that gives recommendations to the director, if someone comes in now with something that wasn't contemplated in this list in the future, there is a mechanism to bring that up and review it and give a recommendation to the director if it should be accepted as a substitute practice in any of these categories. Also in category 1, the various percentages of farms that were treated in various ways. Prior only had a potential of 3 points that were available. Now in this method, there's 4. Again, remember, we went from a 10-point system to a 12-point system. Let's go on to the category 2, farm irrigation systems. In this category, BMPs 2.1 through 2.4 all actually had their point values reduced. That was done because they were considered to be systems without the same amount of efficiency. This particular category requires at least 2 points to even get into the BMP.
Mr. Reagan?
Yes, go right ahead.
Sorry to interrupt there. This is Natalie Mast. I just wanted to point out the half-point reduction to 2.1 through 2.4 actually went in with the 4th management plans. So that's why those aren't redlined here.
And thank you. That is indeed why they're not redlined. I suppose I said it the way I did to indicate that the regulated community agreed that they agreed with what was done in the 4th management plan, and it didn't need to be reconsidered into the 5th management plan. But that is exactly correct. There is no red line there because in the 4th management plan, that is how it was developed. When we get into BMP 2.7, that's when we start a major change to the way the BMP worked. We now have 2 BMPs that indicate in both sprinklers and in trickle, just like in flood systems. We have quite a few categories of flood systems that are not very highly ranked because they're not very efficient. These 2 BMPs recognized that under certain circumstances, sprinklers may not be very efficient. And under certain circumstances, trickle irrigation may not have the kind of efficiency that is desired. So as you'll see as we move forward, fully maintained and operated at their best efficiency, sprinkler and trickle systems maintained very, very high point values, but ones that did not were dropped in points substantially. Working on through, there was a redefinition of pointing in near level and level basin systems. And then we get into BMP 2.9, new numbers, 2.11 and 2.12, which are the qualifying low pressure sprinkler systems and trickle irrigation systems, which are worth the full 4 points, the most that can be had with a system in this category. Again, you'll see that we have a substitute farm practice here that is tailored to this particular category, and where new systems, if they are brought to the department for consideration, there is the ability for the BMP committee to look at them and make a recommendation to the director. I'll just hold my breath or hold my comments for a second and ask if up to this point in time there's any questions. There none being, we will move on to category 3 of the BMP program, which is irrigation water management practices. In this, there was prior the point, which was BMP 3.1, of laser or GPS touch-ups to flood irrigation. This was awarded in the very initial BMP because it was recognized that laser systems, very flat systems, begin to lose their efficiency over time. And to keep them in the best of condition at maximum efficiency, they need a certain degree of touch-up, being brought back to full efficiency. Again, this was here in the very beginning for flood systems. BMP 3.2 and 3.3 are new to the program. They give points to those users of sprinkler systems and trickle systems for doing enhanced and better maintenance to keep their systems working at their top, because they are both machines, more or less, and there is wear and tear and things that become inefficient and non-uniform over time unless things are done. So point values are given to the fact that those who will utilize the concepts that are given here are making a more efficient and a more highly conservative system, and they're awarded points in the program for doing so. We changed as we went through. There was a change in one of the definitions of angled rows, recognizing that angled rows and contour farming, there never was specifically the concept of angled borders, which flows right into that. So that definitional change was made. And that is as far as the changes. There was an opening up of 3.14 to use weather services other than ASMET, which when this was done back at the beginning of the third management plan, ASMET was about all there was to use, whereas now there's a plethora of services that can be used for this purpose. This change in this BMP reflects that. Again, we've stuck in a substitute irrigation and water management caveat in this section that operates the way it's been described in the other sections. Moving into category 4, you can see that on several of these, there's no changes whatsoever. Back at the end of this, BMP 4.8, again, recognized that planting in the bottom of a furrow gave the same aspects of conservation and a practice that planting in the bottom of a bed or a border did. So since that definition had not been explicit in that fashion, it was meant to reflect that. There was a couple of new BMPs put in this section that hadn't existed before. In their entirety, they were new. One of them was for the trickle irrigation users. The use of chemical maintenance within the system to keep the system open and keep the efficiencies and uniformities higher. So that's a 1-point system that is new to this. Another BMP that was added to this in some of the areas, particularly in the western Phoenix RID and some other spots more in the Phoenix AMA than the Pinal AMA, some steeper sandy soils that are shallow that have been difficult to do leveling in because they get into poor soil. One of the things they've been doing over the years is the use of a substance called polyacrylamide, which actually is a flocculating agent that removes suspended soil in the water and makes the soil stay in place, so soil erosion is reduced and much better efficiencies can be done in a system that has less efficiency by design because of the deficiencies of where it sits, soil depth, soil structure, and salinity. There is likewise another substitute agronomic practice caveat in BMP4s. And then at the very bottom in section 2, which is new, is an actual description of how the practice of bringing a substitute practice to the BMP committee and going to the director to see if it can be approved and be added to the list. So the department and the regulated community spent a great deal of time on this. I myself am very gratified the way the department and the regulated community came together to put all this together. I think we have made a document that shows to the non-agricultural observers in the state of Arizona that agriculture is serious about conserving water to the best of its ability, efficiencies as high as they can make them. They agreed to actually make things more difficult for themselves in this. They didn't ask for a carve out. They asked to rate the things that really are good as really good, and some things that aren't as good, let's rate them less. So we really incentivize people to improve their systems and do the best they can. Again, I'm gratified that the department, the regulated community were able to go through this, which I think was nothing but a beneficial exercise that's made it better for the state of Arizona and agriculture in general. And I'll open at this point in time for any questions whatsoever on the BMP program as it's sitting, waiting to see how it gets inserted into the 5th management plan.
Thank you, Scott. Do any of the members have questions or comments for Scott?
Chairman Collins, this is Brian Hartman.
Yes, Brian, go ahead.
I'd just like to say what a good job BMP Committee Chairman Riggins has done, along with ADWR staff in this difficult pandemic environment. At least from my perspective, growers and landowners' concerns with the BMP changes were addressed. And I think you have a fine product here. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I also would like to echo that same comment. I'm impressed by the cooperative effort between both the ag community and ADWR on this BMP program. Any other questions or comments for Scott? Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairman Collins.
This brings us to item number 10. Amanda Long will give us a presentation on the management plan update for the 5th management plan activities.
Thank you, Chairman Collins and members of the council. My name is Amanda Long, and I am the management plans coordinator here at ADWR. Today, I'm going to give an update on the 5th management plan's timeline, drafting, as well as the current conservation program proposals. Next slide, please. Thanks. So first, I'll start with the timeline for the 5th management plans. Thanks. So as a reminder, this is the statute that we develop the management plans under. There should be a management plan for each AMA for 5 periods, and that they should be designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. Next slide. So we started the development phase of the 5 MPs in 2019 with the 5th management plan work group process. The intention was to wrap up the process at the end of 2020. However, further discussions have been, so this phase has continued into 2021. and we plan to finalize those last details soon. We have been concurrently working on the drafting phase. This phase includes writing concepts into the narrative and legal language portions of the plan, developing data tools, and receiving feedback from both the GOACs and AMA stakeholders on how we might customize the plans for each AMA. We have been making good progress on this phase and are on track to publish initial drafts in early 2022 and adopt all 5 plans by the end of 2022, with the conservation programs becoming effective on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So the structure of the 5th management plans will be similar across the AMAs. However, as mentioned in the previous slide and then at the discussion at the beginning of this meeting, the plans will be customized with feedbacks from the GOACs and from local AMA stakeholders. Staff will also continue with the 5 MP subgroup meetings to review the draft regulatory language as it becomes available, again with the goal of publishing the initial draft early next year. There will be many opportunities for comment and input during the development, drafting, and adoption phases. Next slide. So now I'm going to go and give an overview of the current proposed conservation programs for the 5 MPs. Next slide, thanks. So the first is the agricultural conservation programs. As Mr. Riggins mentioned, staff has worked with the Agricultural BMP Advisory Committee through multiple meetings to develop recommendations for the BMP program in the 5 MPs. I won't go into details as Mr. Riggins just provided a pretty detailed overview in the previous presentation, but this table does give a summary of the recommendations, and the full red line version is linked here at the bottom of this slide. And I believe Natalie and I both dropped a link in the chat box. Staff would like to thank the committee members and the regulated community for their thoughtful comments and suggestions and commitment throughout the process. Staff's intent is to include both of the recommendations, so the new BMPs, the updated BMPs, and the points targets changes as recommended by the BMP committee into the regulatory language of the 5th management plan. Next slide. So the Integrated Farm Program is a new agricultural conservation program that has been developed as an alternative to the BASE and BMP programs. This program is completely voluntary. It is an allotment-based program that would allow multiple IGRs to be combined under one reporting umbrella. So this is similar to how IGRs can report together in the BMP program, but instead of implementing BMPs, the allotments from participating rights under the same owner-operator could be combined, and that owner-operator could use the water anywhere on the combined footprint. The total allotment would have a cut to the aquifer or a % reduction of that total combined allotment. The program, we see it as a kind of middle program between the BASE and BMP programs. It reduces the administrative burden of having to report on and exchange flex credits on each individual right, as in the BASE program, but it does not require the implementation and reporting on individual BMPs as in the BMP program. Instead, the Integrated Farm Program has the ease of an allotment-based program with the administrative benefit of the BMP program. The Integrated Farm Program proposal was released earlier this month and presented at the last subgroup meeting. That was, I believe, on May 19th. The proposal is available on the link on this slide and then also on the 5th Management Plan Concepts page. There are a few details that we still need to work out in this program, and we are continuing to accept feedback on the proposal. Next slide. So next I'll talk about the programs for the municipal sector. So the Municipal Non-Per Capita Conservation Program is a BMP-based program. Municipal providers are required to implement a number of BMP points determined by their service connections. In the 5 MP proposal, we adjusted the number of service connections by tier and also added an additional tier so that providers would be more evenly distributed across their tiers. We also increased the number of BMP points required per tier and added a requirement that BMP points must be earned from a minimum number of categories to increase the diversity of BMPs being implemented. We added a new planning category, which contains BMPs related to integrated water and land use planning and other types of long-range planning activities. And lastly, we adjusted many of the BMP's implementation and reporting requirements to collect more quantitative data that can be used to determine whether a BMP is effectively conserving water. Next slide. The municipal GPCD program is an allotment-based conservation program. The 5MP GPCD requirement calculation maintains the same default minimum and maximum structure as seen in the 4th management plan, but the calculations were updated to use rolling averages in order to provide more realistic requirements that still result in groundwater conservation. To ensure that the 5MP would result in greater conservation, we looked at the total volume of the 4MP GPCD requirements versus what the 5MP GPCD requirements would have been and across each AMA. The chart on this slide shows the total 4MP GPCD requirements volume in light blue and the total 5MP GPCD requirements volume in dark blue for the Pinal AMA. We are also proposing updating the flexibility account provisions for the 5MP. The current flexibility account provisions, which account for variations in precipitation differs across AMAs. They range from a negative limit of -10 to -20 and a positive limit of 30 to 60. ADWR is proposing streamlining the flexibility account provisions across all AMAs and proposes a middle range of -15 and positive 45 for all AMAs. And this is actually the current 4MP limits for the Pinal AMA, meaning that the Pinal AMA would see no difference in their limits. The current compliance GPCD calculation includes water from any source except direct use effluent and effluent recovered within the area of impact for non-irrigation use. In the 5MPs, we are proposing that the compliance GPCD calculation includes all sources of water except non-potable direct use effluent and non-potable effluent recovered within the area of impact for non-irrigation use. To align with the need for conservation of all water types and the value of potable water, the proposal removes potable effluent incentive. Next slide. So next, I will talk about the proposals for the industrial sector. First, I'll talk about golf. So the development of the golf conservation program had several goals: to reduce withdrawals of groundwater, to make the impact equitable between the different course types, to incorporate realistic practices into the allotment method, and also to increase simplicity and transparency. Previous golf conservation programs were incredibly complex and difficult to understand for both staff and the regulated community. So there are currently 2 proposals for the golf conservation program. One was released in February and one in April. Both proposals have been adjusted to fit each AMA, but follow a similar structure. They both have a allotment method, allotment additions, and an effluent incentive. The allotment method consists of different limits and application rates for different aspects of the golf course, so turf, low water use acres, and surface water acres. However, the method is just a way to set the allotment, so golf courses may still use that water on their course as they see fit. Each of the 2 proposals has different trade-offs and impacts courses differently depending on the characteristics of the course. The conservation program for golf has not yet been finalized. We have received a lot of feedback on the program and discussions are still ongoing. Next slide. So the non-golf conservation program has few changes from the 4th management plan. And the changes are centered on the method used to develop the maximum annual allotment. So similar to the golf program, staff did have the goal of including realistic practices and application rates. The turf application rates were adjusted to represent the application rates and proportions of different uses of turf, such as decorative or ornamental and athletic uses. The resulting application rates were actually very similar to what was in the fourth management plan. The biggest change to the non-golf program is actually to the low water use acres application rate. This updated number better incorporates scientific data and more closely reflects the needs of low water use acres. And as with the golf program, you can see on the slide, the non-golf program was adjusted for each AMA. Next slide. So staff is currently having internal discussions on updates to the recharge and recovery program and discussing simple administrative things that can be adjusted to streamline applications for both the applicant and for ADWR staff while still meeting the goals of the program. We have had, we still have some internal work to do before sharing details, but we will schedule a public meeting once those details are available. Next slide. Thank you. So I'd just like to end with a reminder of the fifth plan concepts page, which is available online. All those today outlined on page with additional details on each proposal, relevant meeting links, relevant dashboards and graphics, as well as the stakeholder feedback that we have so far. I encourage you to visit this for more details on anything I talked about here today. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. My contact information is on this slide, and the management plans team and I are happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Amanda. Do the members have any questions for Amanda on her presentation? Just real quick, Amanda, how has the regulated water providers in Pinal responded to the municipal water fifth management plan concepts?
I can take that. This is Natalie Mast. Hi, Chairman Collins. So we've had both public meetings discussing this with various stakeholders across the AMAs, and we have had some side conversations with a couple of the providers, specifically in the Pinal AMA. We've gotten really positive feedback on both of the municipal program updates, but we're certainly open to additional discussions there.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Amanda. Hearing no other questions, we'll move on to item number 11, which is call to the council. Do any of the members of the council have any comments, questions, or concerns they'd like to address at this point in time? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 12, which will be a call to the public. Does anyone from the public have any questions, comments, or concerns they'd like to express at this time? I did notice that in the chat box that Brent Billingsley from the town of Florence indicated he would like to compliment the presenters on their slide decks and presentations. Very professional. Thank you, Brent. Are there any other comments, questions, or concerns from the public? Hearing no objections, I would like to call this meeting to adjourn, unless there are any objections. Hearing none, we will call the meeting to adjourn at 2:42 p.m. Thank you all for your participation. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, hopefully in July.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.